What's up, y'all? Welcome back to MSM Audio. I'm Tim. Thank y'all for tuning in. Today, I want to discuss three reasons height, width, and depth transform your mixes. I'm always trying to improve my mixes and figure out where I'm making mistakes and where I need to be sharper at. And I was referencing this book, Mixing and Mastering in the Box by Steve Savage. And in the book, he discusses 3D mixes or three-dimensional mixing. Concept is not new, but I wanted to highlight it because of the way he presented and discussed the information. It's very simple, concise, and cohesive. Right now, you can go online and find these topics discussed, but in my experience, it's been disjointed when looking for information. And you have, discussions on height, EQ, frequency here, width, depth. And for me personally, I was mixing from a very narrow perspective, primarily focusing on height. Now, I did include elements of width and depth, but just my approach and my thinking wasn't in totality of thinking of and visualizing the mix in 3D. So just want to go over some of these concepts and let's jump right into it. I'm going to start with height or the frequency spectrum. Height is the perceived pitch range of your mix, controlled by EQ and harmonic content. Represents the vertical balance of your mix from low end weight to the high end sparkle. Kick and bass live low, snare and vocal sit mid, cymbals and air live high. When your mix feels muddy or harsh, it's often because the height distribution is off. Use EQ to carve space vertically, not just to fix problems, but to define the vertical stack of your track. Some examples: roll off lows and non bass instruments, add subtle high end shelf on vocals for air, and compare a mixed with balanced height versus one that's frequency heavy in the mids. Next, section 2, width, the stereo field. Width equaling horizontal space created by panning, stereo imaging, and phase control. How you spread your instruments across the left and right speakers. Without width, your mix sounds narrow or mono. Everything fights for the same space, something I've been guilty of. Panning is your best friend. Think of each sound as a musician on a stage. You don't want everyone standing in the middle. Use stereo imaging tools to enhance perceived width, but always check mono capability. Keep your low end elements centered. Spread the mids and highs for texture and balance. Some examples: hard pan guitars or hi hats, sensor vocals and bass. Use a stereo imager or chorus plugin to add width on pads and collapse mix to mono to show how too much widening can cause phase loss. So, just thinking about that, right? You have this oral dimensions, so to speak, right? And actually, let me just go to section 3 before I get into that. Depth. How close or far each sound feels, controlled by reverb, delay, volume, and transients. Depth is what makes your mix feel alive. It's the difference between a dry demo and a cinematic record. Close sounds are dry, bright, punchy. Distant sounds are darker, softer. Have reverb tails. Use reverb and delay to create distance, but keep your lead elements up front. Control depth with dynamics, transit shaping, reverb pre-delay, subtle volume, automation. Depth also lives in your arrangement. Layering sounds with complementary decay times adds realism. And here's a few examples here. So, what I wanted to get to is the visualization part, which is something that I lacked. Like, I was applying these different elements, but not really visualizing the mix, not visualizing this oral dimension, so to speak, right? It's like a playground, right? You have your height, your vertical stack, EQ, frequencies. You have your width, right? If you want to pan something to the left, pan something hard right, and understanding how much of a difference these subtle changes can open things up. Your stereo imaging, right? If you want to move sounds to the side, right? If you want to alter between left and right channels, invert the phase, like all of these subtle changes can make huge differences in your mix. And just visualizing that as you're creating, right? And having an idea of how you want to shape as you create, and then getting to the mixing stage and understanding you have all these options available to you. If you want to add that depth, right? If you want to bring a sound forward, shift it over. If you need to push one back, shift it over. Like, you have all these options. It really is like an oral dimensional playground. So just thinking about mixing that way, visualizing it as you're creating. And it also helps to give better context to the tools that you use, right? And how to use them, and getting into the finite details to learn how to shape that reverb, to learn how to shape, working with delay. So it really just helped in my general approach, and just the way you keep everything in consideration as you're making changes to all of these different elements. They all relate to each other. Okay. Section 4, combining the three dimensions. Magic happens when height, width, and depth interact, creating a realistic, full, and balanced mix. Think of your mix as a cube: height, frequency balance, width, stereo placement, depth, space, and reverb. Some takeaways: every great mix lives in 3D, height, width, and depth. If your mix feels crowded, muddy, or thin, think, which dimension am I ignoring? When you start visualizing sound instead of just hearing it, you mix with intention. So, again, just going back to thinking about your mix from a cohesive standpoint in regards to height, width, and depth, as opposed to, before, if I would have a track, I'd be listening to a certain sound and say, okay, I think this needs some reverb, not really considering how that might impact width, not considering how that might impact the height, not considering how, if I add some reverb, how is that going to impact the sounds that are already taking up that space, right? So it really just opens everything up when you think about your mixes from a visual standpoint. So now I have a couple tracks here just to demonstrate briefly. I have a dry track and a wet track. So I have some bells here, bass here, and keys. So let's start with the bells and let's listen to the dry track. Okay, play it one more time. And there's some like ringing transients there, but I'll just have to adjust that in the plugin. I'm using Pigments. This was a bell sound I found in Pigments. Now, for the bells, I panned a little to the left and I inverted the phase in the left channel. So let's see how that sounds. All right, now that I gave the context, now let me just go right to the bell portion. I'm going to play the dry and then the wet. Right, so you can start to see how, again, you can start shaping that oral dimension. It's just like this playground where you can pretty much do anything you want to do. So let's move on to the bass. I'm gonna play it from the bells to give the context, and then I'll go exactly where the bass is after. So let's listen. Okay, now let's hear the wet. Okay, now what I did there is I panned that bass a little bit further to the left of the bells, and both left and right channels, the phase was inverted. So let's hear the dry again, directly on the bass. And the wet. Right, so you start to see how you can play with the space. Now let's move on to the keys. I'm gonna play the dry first. Actually, let me play it from the bass for context. Okay, now the wet. And then again, I'll play it directly from where the keys start. Now, for this, I panned it a little to the right. I delayed the phase in the left channel, and then using Fruity Stereo Shaper, I added this Stereoize preset, which added some stereo effects, some left-right channel mixing, and phase and delay. That's what the preset was made up of. So, all right, let's hear the dry from where the keys start. It's very subtle, but you can hear it. Go back to the dry again. In the wet. So it really helps your approach to visualize your mix and really think about it from that 3D perspective. And, that book really presented the information in a way that just unlocked, my approach to mixing, right? Again, you have your height, you have your width, you want to shift things left, right? You want to play with the stereo imaging, invert the phase, push things back, move them over, bring them up, move them over, an oral dimensional playground. And you really have so much at your disposal. And again, it gives better context to the tools that you have: reverb, delay, EQ, stereo imaging. And the more you dive into the details, the more you be better to start to shape and create. I mean, the creativity it opens up from creating from that aspect is just, it's unlimited, right? So now things can really start getting interesting. So just wanted to share that. Thank y'all for tuning in. Stay positive, stay purposeful, stay creative, stay confident. Most of all, keep going. See you on the next one. MSM Audio.